gives us power to become sons and daughters. But not forgetting that at one time you were without inheritance, that you were far, and you have now been brought near. But just like a friend needs to remember what it is to be a servant, a son needs to remember what it is to not have inheritance, to be just a friend. And so as we go to the next level, and Yahweh being the Ish, the husband, he allows his bride now being a spouse to him, being espoused to him, being in courtship, being in covenant with him. Now he says that you can do what happened in Ezekiel 16 and give yourself away, because I have given you all these things, and now you take those things and give them to your lovers, and you can now separate yourself. In Jeremiah, he says, I gave Israel a get of divorce, a certificate of divorce, and put her away. And so he's recognizing that we can break the covenant. He will always stand by his covenant, but we can break the covenant. We can break the covenant. So now, understanding these things, we can't get rid of one without the other, right? And so this is really the stage that where we're going to kind of go through the overall scope, the broad base of this. And this is Ayer, Asher, Hayah. And really what that means is exactly what the message is around. I am that which I am. In saying that, he's saying I'm everything that you'll ever need. Right now, I'm all things. I don't have to become something so that I'm not sufficient now. I don't have to reinvent myself because you've outpaced me. And now I've got to figure out how to be what you need. Yahweh said to Moshe, I'm everything right now, right this second, that you'll ever need. Exodus chapter 6, verse 1. Exodus chapter 6, verse 1. And it says, and Yahweh said to Moshe, now see what I do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he is going to let them go. And with a strong hand he is going to drive them out of his land. And Elohim spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Yahweh. And I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai. And by my name, Yahweh, was I not known to them? The recognition, and some people, they kind of get this twisted, assuming that Hayah, Asher, Hayah is his name. But when he says, I am that which I am, he's displaying his character. So when you find yourself away and needing redemption, I am the master, the kinsman redeemer that can come and bring you back, redeem you, purchase you. That makes you my slave. But I'm a righteous master. And so he's saying I'm everything right in this place, right here, right now. And he says to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov, I was their almighty one. That's Shaddai, being that shin. When you see that shin, it's representing teeth. And that teeth is the protector. So that's what he's saying. I protect, I keep, I shield. And so in him being that, he's saying, look, your fathers recognized and knew that I was all that they needed. So I'll be that for you, Moshe. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 41. Isaiah chapter 41, verse 8. I want to begin to kind of break something down here. And it says, but thou, Israel, art my servant, Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Pay attention to what just happened here. He's speaking of Israel. And he says, but thou, Israel, art my servant. 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 That's the first stage of relationship. And coming into relationship with the Creator. Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. The next level there. And the Hebrew word for friend here is not the typical Hayah. So I want to take a look at this. The word that's used is H157. It's ahab. Ahab. And it means to love. So it's like saying my loved one. So he's basically saying, Israel, you're my servant. Yaakov, whom I have chosen. The seed of Abraham, my loved one. My loved one. Let's look at Proverbs now. We're going to start in verse 22. Go down to verse 24. Proverbs chapter 18. I'm sorry. Should have gave you the chapter, huh? Proverbs chapter 18, verse 22. And we're going to read down through verse 24. So 22, 23, and 24. And it says, he who has found a wife has found good and receives favor from Yahweh. The poor speaks beseechingly, but the rich answers fiercely. A man of many friends might come to ruin, but there is a loving one who sticks closer than a brother. But there is a loving one who sticks closer than a brother. Now I want y'all to really follow me on this, because this is very interesting. This few verses here start out speaking about what? A man finding a wife. A man finding a wife. When you begin to translate the words that are used here, it tells a very beautiful story. If you look at verse 24, transliterated, it'll give us a little bit of a different meaning. A little bit of a different meaning. So we have here the word ish. Ish is the first word. So where it says a man, the word that's right there is ish. Okay? Ish. If you look at the first friends, where it says a man of many friends, friends right there, then that word is Hayah. That's the one that we're used to. That's the one that we've kind of been using as we've been going through this. That word is Hayah. So again, that first word, the first one is Ish. The second one is Hayah, which is friends. Now, sticks closer. Sticks closer. Interesting. That is badek. Badek. And that is to cleave. To cleave. The loving one, remember that word that we went over in Isaiah, where it says to love, where he called Abraham his loved one. Isaiah chapter 41, verse 8. That word was ahab, right? This word actually comes back up here where it says the loving one. So right in there where it says a loving one who sticks closer, that a loving one part. That the word is ahab or ahab. That brother, the end of the word, the end of the verse rather. Brother is from or out of the ak, and that's brother or another or like. That word ak is brother or another or one that is alike, one that is like. And so kind of put those together. And what you have is, remember the first word is not just regular man. What's the normal word for man that you see when it's just talking about man as in mankind? Adam. That's what we typically see. But here is Aish or Ish, which is what? Husband. That's a different kind of man. Husbandman. And so let's put all of that together. A husbandman of many Rayahs. Rayah, the friend, that first level of beyond master-servant relationship. Rayah, many Rayah comes to ruin. But there is a Heb. There is a loving one. There is a loving one, a loved one who sticks closer or who cleaves, sticks closer or cleaves than another like. And if you've not caught what's happening there, remember what the scripture in Genesis says. What does it say that Adam would do? A man for this. That's right. For this, a man will leave his father and his mother, and he will cleave to his wife. This is showing us, it's really speaking very much along the same lines. If you look at Proverbs 18:22 and then go into verse 24, you're getting really the same thing, which is it's representing a husband cleaving to a bride. And the thing that I really like is how it steps through the process. How it starts with the friend, the Rayah. And so it shows that last step of going from friend to family, friend to children, to now husband, wife, bride. Let's look at 1 John. 1 John chapter 5. We'll start at verse 1 and go through verse 4. 1 John chapter 5, verse 1, and we're going to go down through verse 4. And it reads, "Everyone who believes that Yeshua is the Master has been born of Elohim. And everyone who loves the one bringing forth also loves the one having been born of him." Y'all remember when we talked about the Ish, and remember when we talked about a bride from the side, a bride pulled from the side? Y'all remember that? Where we talked about Abraham, and we talked about Yaakov. We talked about when even with Yeshua being on the stake, and he was poked in the side, and out came that blood and water. Him being now put to sleep. All three of those scenarios, Yaakov was put to sleep, and it became Israel, who would later become the bride of the Messiah. The Messiah was put to sleep, and then poked, stabbed in his side, came blood, water, as giving birth in freeing us from the curse, not the law, from the curse placed upon us because of disobedience to the law. He has now freed us to be his bride. That's what he has done in his death and in our dying. Because what's the Torah around taking a bride back that you put away? You can't. You can't. The Torah says that this is like a dog returning to its vomit. So this is Yahweh creating a way of being able to take us back. Verse 2. 1 John chapter 5, verse 2. But by this we know that we love the children of Elohim. When we love Elohim and do what? Guard his commands. For this is the love of Elohim, that we guard his commands, and his commands are not heavy, because everyone having been born of Elohim overcomes the world. And this is the overcoming that has overcome the world, our belief. Now let's think about this. How many times have you heard somebody say, oh, we can't keep the law because it's too hard? Well, here we see in the New Testament, by the way, in verse 3, it says, his commands are not heavy. Now, we all know, we can go back to the Torah and see that, where he says that it is not so far away that you shall say, who shall ascend into the heavens and bring it to us? Or who shall go over the deep and bring it to us? And he says, or under the earth, so that they bring it to us and cause us to hear it so that we do it. He says it's not too far away. It is so close. He says it's very near you, in your heart, in your mouth, to do it. That's the reason it's near you, is so that you can do it. And so in this, we can abide by and stay in line with being in relationship with Yahweh. And that is what now propels us to the place of being the bride. But if we can't get that first step of obedience, we can't even be a servant. And if we can't even be a servant, how will we ever become friends? If we are never friends, how can we become children? If we have never been brought into the home, how can we ever become bride? So let's look at one of my favorite scriptures. Because at the end of the day, this takes everything. Everything. And allows us to see what is really at the heart of all of it. Being in relationship with Yahweh. Why is it important to be obedient in the stage of servant? Why is it important to be obedient in the stage of friend? Why is it important to be obedient in the stage of children? Why is it important to be obedient and submissive in the stage of bride? Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 and 14. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 and 14. It says, let us hear the conclusion of the entire matter. Fear Elohim and guard his commands. And if we just read that in 1 John, chapter 5? We just read that. John said they're not too heavy. He says, guard his commands, for this applies to just the Jews. That's not, I don't know of a translation that says that. For this applies to all mankind. All mankind. Verse 14 says, for Elohim shall bring every work into right ruling, including all that is hidden, whether good or whether evil. So it's the conclusion of the entire matter. It's to obey Elohim. It's to fear Elohim. How is it that we fear Elohim? How do we show Yahweh that we fear him? Let me ask you this. All of us that have children, do we not know the faces of our children when they think they're getting away with something and you look at them and they look at you like, did you see that? Don't we all know that face? And for the children, don't y'all really be thinking in your head, I hope she didn't see that? I hope he didn't hear that? So what does that mean? You know what? What do you know? Elise, what you know? What you know at that point? You know that what? What'd you say, Dominique? That you wasn't supposed to do it anyway. And you're going to get in trouble. So let's think about this for a second, y'all. Let's think about this for a second. Let's jump a stage. Let's go to the stage of children. Let's go to the stage of children. Think about this. If you could look at your child doing something wrong, and they could look you dead in the eyes and not care and continue doing it anyway, how would that make you feel as a parent? I mean, it's like every range of emotion you can think of, right? It's like, you don't even know what to say. Because you like, what's the first thing you think? I know what I think. The first thing I think is, oh, you ain't even scared, which means you're going to continue to do it regardless. Can people not see that this is how we look when we say to a sovereign God, we don't have to obey your laws because you told somebody else to tell me I don't have to do it? Y'all, I don't know about y'all, but you had to be real careful who you got messages from about what your parents told you you could and couldn't do, right? Like, you had to be real careful. You were like, did mommy really say I could do that? Because, sometimes your cousins, they be trying to just get you to do what they want to do anyway. So they'll be like, your mama said you can come with me. And I don't know about y'all, but I always wanted to verify because I ain't want to be like, be done did something or done ate something or know your mama told you better not eat no more cookies. But she said you can have one more. No, you better ask my mama. So how in the world is it that we can say Shaul, Paul, comes to give us permission to break the laws of Yahweh? And now as a result, when we are disobedient, we simply look at him and say, I can't imagine how Yahweh feels about blatant, in your face, I don't care and I'm not changing disobedience. Like, what stage do you go to? Like, where is that? If you're at servant, what's going to happen to a servant who's just blatantly disobedient to the master? At some point, he ain't going to be that master's servant no more. Or you're going to hear a Color Purple line. You told Harpo to beat me. Because that servant is probably going to get some flaw hooks to help them understand obedience. And if that don't work, then at some point that servant is going to be out. And they're going to be somewhere trying to figure out how to make it without the master. That's where disobedience gets us. And so how is it that we can then look at a sovereign Elohim and say, you're sovereign. I love you. I serve you. What's that song? I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. So, I mean, we sing for your glory. I would do anything. Stop eating pork. Now, I won't do that.
That's right.
Celebrate my holy days and leave the traditions of man behind. Nah, I can't do that either. Nah, I can't do that. Nah, don't have to do that. We have to think about these things. We have to think about these things. So, in closing, I want to go through one more time because I think this is very important. Understanding these things for each stage. The roles, the qualities, the examples. And I won't go through too many examples in depth. I'll just touch on the examples. But I do want to go through the qualities, the roles and qualities. So stage one, Adonai. Yahweh is our master. We are his servants. Qualities of a good master. Now, here's the thing. If you can check these things off for Yahweh, then I think that means that we're working on ourselves on the other part of it, right? So if Yahweh is a good, let's see, is Yahweh a good provider?
Yes.
Is he a protector?
Yes.
Does he provide guidance?
Yes.
Is he fair?
Yes.
Does he have compassion?
Yes.
Is he trustworthy?
Yes.
Does he provide clarity?
Yes.
Is he wise? Yes. Is he a visionary? Yes. Okay, so now, don't answer these. How do we grade? Are we obedient? Are we submissive? Are we loyal? Are we honest? Are we dedicated? Do we have a good work ethic? And are we trusting of Yahweh? Those are the things that we need to be looking at. And again, these are not exclusive of each other. These things, this means that we have to keep that as we move into the next area, which is friends. Now these are mutual. So we can acknowledge Yahweh and we can say Yahweh he's trusting. He will provide us with sound counsel and advice. He's honest. Yahweh reveals himself. Sometimes y'all know that some people are confused by Yahweh when he is vulnerable with us. Like, understand what that means. Think about this. This is an example. Think about it. There was a time when Yahweh said, you know what? I'm going to let Moses know how frustrated I am. And he said, I'm going to destroy everybody and start over with you. Man, that's a friend. He dealt with Moshe to that level. And it even says that he spoke to Moshe as a man speaks to his friend, face to face. Face to face. Yahweh is obviously unselfish. I don't know of any greater act of unselfishness than that he took on sinful flesh, put himself in a place of being vulnerable to his creation, and allowed us to have dominion over his body, to put him in pain, to make him to witness firsthand the evilness of man's heart. That's what he did when he came in the form of man, in the form of sinful flesh. And he died for us in that state to deliver us and redeem us. There's also supportiveness, respect, a genuine appreciation of the relationship. That's a question that we have to ask. Because, y'all, sometimes what we really want, here's what we really want. We just want a genie that we can rub a bottle and the genie come out and grant us a wish. You know, some point, and I was speaking with a lady. This was I don't know, it was probably a couple months ago. But she asked me. She said, I'm having problems. Just praying. I don't necessarily, know how to pray, and I don't know. I'm just a bit perplexed when it comes to that. And I was like, well, let me ask you this. When you pray, what is that? What do you see that as meaning? And she's like, well, I mean, just, asking God for, things. I mean, I would like to be married, and, I'd like to progress in my career, and da-da-da. And I was like, if you had a friend that the only time they communicated with you is when they were asking for things, what would you think about the relationship? And she just stopped and was like, oh. It's like, yeah. If you want to talk to your friend, sometimes you just want to see how they're doing. Sometimes you just want to tell them thank you for being there for you. Sometimes it's that simple. And so a genuine appreciation of the relationship is that we don't always get to ask Yahweh for stuff. This is why I'm so protective of praise and worship and the words that we speak during that time. Because I want to tell of his greatness. I want to speak of his loving commitment and his loving kindness. I want to tell him how much I love him. This is not the time to ask him for anything. To remind him, oh yeah, by the way, I've been in situations where there have been just, beautiful worship going forth, and Yahweh is just being blessed by people, and somebody just starts to talk, and all of a sudden now it's like the atmosphere is right. If you need something from God, now's the time to ask. Wait a minute. No, it's actually not. Now is the time to thank him for what he's already done. It's okay for Dayanu to be your testimony. What is Dayanu? It would have been enough. It would have been enough, Yahweh. If you only saw me as a servant and never elevated me to friend, it would have been enough. It would have been enough. Because why? I appreciate the relationship. Even if I'm just a servant. But as Fred Hammond said, I'm overwhelmed. Overwhelmed that you have called me friend. Me. Companionship and accountability. Companionship and accountability. These are things that we need to be aware of how we're addressing Yahweh in our friendship with him. Not always asking him for stuff. Appreciating the relationship and understanding that guess what, y'all? Guess what? Y'all know why we have feelings? Because he has feelings. Like, we got to remember that. Yahweh has feelings. And so we have to be careful how we approach him. He's given us a roadmap and said, this is how you approach me. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This being now father, children. He is the father, we are the children. As being father, he provides for us. He protects us. He instructs us, guides us, corrects us, directs us, loves us, provides us with wisdom, a vision, a legacy, and an inheritance. He's promised us these things. He's promised us an inheritance. But if you are not his child, you do not get his inheritance. If you are not obedient to him, then you are not his child. Then you do not get his inheritance. Because even if you are a child, what does it say you do with the wayward child who does not do and adhere to the voice of his father or his mother? You take him to the elders, and there's some stones flying. There's some stones flying. So what's next? We as children. Question is, are we obedient? What did Messiah say? You have to come as a child. He says you cannot even inherit the kingdom unless you come as this child. If you don't come like this child, what does that mean? Children, even though y'all know they get on our nerves sometimes, and but I tell you one thing, boy. When I see a sad face on my children's face, I want to know what's going on. And when I say, here's what we're doing, when I say come here, when I say get in the car, when I say, they are obedient. Now I got one that's always, she's just curious. She wants to know what's going on. Where are we going, Daddy? What's next, Daddy? What's that, Daddy? What's this? But we as children of the Most High, we have to learn how to just be obedient. Just be obedient. Because it's not always that. I was trying to explain something to her the other day. I didn't know how to explain it. Y'all know what it was? She asked me what was the projects. And I was like, well, this is kind of a good thing. Because I was very aware what the projects was. Because you ride down the street and you see it says so-and-so projects. So-and-so projects. And you know what the projects was. It was right there on the little marquee. But I didn't know how to explain it to her. I was like, try to explain it. This is a place where people live. Is, typically it's low income housing where people who can't afford different places that they can go there, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to explain it to her, but in the context of what we were talking about, it still wasn't going to make sense. It still just wasn't going to make sense. And she was just like, okay. But the thing is that we know that living affords us certain experiences, and you just sort of have random knowledge that may or may not be important. But the point is that there are certain things just because you've been alive longer, you know. How much more so do we think Yahweh knows? He created everything. And so if that be the case, then we have to trust that he knows. So when he says, hey, you know what? Don't eat that. Do we really have to understand why he said that? As a matter of fact, what's most of y'all's answer when your child says something and or you say to your child, do X, Y, and Z, and they say, why? What you say?
Because I said so.
Thank you. Because I said so. So, you know what? That from now on, that's the only thing. Yahweh said do not add or subtract, but I'm just asking Yahweh, can I like just, like put a little marker next to sort of thing? Now, I'm not going to add it in, but I just want to put a marker in there right after every command that's comma, because Yah said so. So then when you get into your deep study of why you don't have to keep the commands and why Jesus paid it all and did everything for you, then you can maybe read that part. People putting all kind of stuff in their translations, so I'm going to make my own translation. And it's going to be all of the Torah as it is, with one exception. Everywhere where it's a command, it's going to say what? Because Yah said so. So no need to do no further, deeper study. Now you ain't got to do all that. Keep the Sabbath. Why I got to keep? Because I said so. And the thing is, here's the thing. If we read this stuff in the Hebrew, the language is it's a lot more emphatic than English. And so there's not like all of this, all of these fluff words of, I'm going to go to the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to set it apart and keep it holy. For in 7 days, it's like Sabbath, keep, guard. It's like, it's like guard, Sabbath. Right. Next. When 7th day. That's simple. Respectful. Children, we demand respect from our children. So how in the world, I'm telling you, I done heard people say some of the craziest things. I done heard somebody say, when you pay tithe, you can demand God bless you. You pay tithe, you can demand God bless you because he said it. It's in his word. I've heard people say, it's in his word, speak it and tell him that he's supposed to because, respectful. You know what? If I tell my child that, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Y'all know what? I owed at least a gift because she came like way up on her reading thing. She went from like a C or D or E or something to like a O, like way on the other side of the chart. And I was like, man, I'm going to get something for you. Now, I told her that, right? And y'all know sometimes I just be having a whole lot going on. So I just kept forgetting. And she'd be like, Daddy, so what am I going to get? And then I'd be like, oh yeah, what you want? I don't know. And so we out somewhere and she'd be like, Daddy, can I get something? And I'm like, oh yeah. But never not one time was she like, Daddy, you said that I was going to get X, Y, Z. So I'm speaking your word back to you and you must do it. I demand that you get this toy for me right now. Y'all think she would have got that toy? Nope. Nope. I said I was going to get something. This is what I'm going to get. Where my belly? Respectful. Responsible. We have to be responsible. Why? Because as children, guess what that means? Yahweh has control. Things. He has given us control. Yahweh has put within our control his kingdom. He gave us dominion, y'all. Man, if we're not responsible with it, if we're not responsible with the children that we have to make sure they grow up in the fear and admonition of Yahweh, they walk away, that's on us. We have to fight, y'all. And you know one thing I'm happy to say? I'm happy to say, and I was thinking about this the other day, and it's a blessing to me. It really, really, and truly is. I was thinking about some of the children that grew up and are adults, and the ones that are going through college, and the ones that are out on their own. And I mean, this is a blessing. I want y'all to understand that ministries are that when they children grow up and get Chris's age, they're like, I got a car, a job, my own place. No, I ain't coming here on no Shabbat. Wow. It is a blessing. It's a blessing. And what we have to do is make sure, and I'm telling you, I was having this conversation with somebody, and I don't even know how to explain it. I couldn't explain it. Like, I was trying to figure out how to explain it, because he was like, well, you know what? I mean, so y'all don't do altar call, and what about, kids getting saved and blah, blah. I'm like, my decision is for my son to walk Torah now. Absolutely. Like, get saved? What you mean, get saved? Dude, on the 8th day, I committed to Yahweh that his life would be his. And so right now, my entire job is to make sure that he's walking it. Now, there's going to come a point where I can't walk with him. And there's going to come a point where he has to make the decision that I'm walking. But until that day comes, he walking. Period. And it's my job to make sure, that he doesn't loathe the walk, but that he loves the walk. Why? Because when it's up to him, he needs to be able to make the decision for himself. You know what? My dad taught me, and I've got to cover him. My grandfather taught me, I have to cover him. I have to. If I don't, I uncover. Is this not a conversation I've had with you, son? If you don't walk it, you uncover me. You know how hard your papa worked. You know your upline. You know. And so it's important. We can't take this stuff lightly. And so when Yahweh gives us the responsibility, why? Because it's important. Not just for you, for your generations. They depend on you. They depend on you. Why? Because you are the succession. You are the future. Our children are the succession and the future. We can't afford for them to can't wait to get out of here. We can't afford that. They've got to love it. They've got to understand and know that this is life, not a religion. This is not going to church. This is a lifestyle. Yeah. Get that. You get that, don't you? Yeah. That's right. Have to. So we got to make it to the next level. Because from children to Ish, husband and wife, spouse, bride. Husband, what does he do? Provides, protects, guides, gives clarity, wisdom, trustworthy, vision, leadership, love, sowing and reaping. We've got to be a help to him. I use this story. I use this same one. Remember, has anybody read 1 Yeshua chapter 2? You never saw that one? What about 2nd Messiah, chapter 5, verse 3? Never read that one, right? One of them books they lived. How do we know who he is? How do we know who he is? It's because those who walked with him, wrote of him, told of him, documented his life. We know who he is because they made known. They were a help. They were there with him. They were a help. That's what we are. We are the representation of the Messiah. How are others going to know who he is? Because they meet you. Just they're going to meet you. Meet you. Messiah. That's the only way they're going to know. That's the only way they're going to know. So what else do we have? being obedient, being submissive, loyal, honest, dedicated, trusting, respect. We hit that respect again. Harvest, very important. Very, very important. Harvest. Harvest. Why? Because we are the harvest. Remember what I said. We know Yahweh will sow. You know, there's a term that Yahweh, that the scriptures use to describe Yahweh. Yisrael. Yisrael. Yah sows. Yah sows, or El sows. We know he will sow. But remember what I said. What good is a bride? What good is a bride who can't be sown into and who can't bring forth a harvest? What good would we be if we were not fertile soil for him that he could bring forth a harvest? Yeshua spoke a parable and he says, you know that I was a hard master. He says, reaping from where I have not sown and collecting from where I have not sown. He expects for us to bring forth a harvest. He expects for us to bring forth a harvest. And so that's very important for us as his bride, to be proclaimed as his bride. We got to figure that out. And so that is the stages. And again, he is everything. He's the beginning, he's the end, the Aleph, the Tav, Hayah, Asher, Hayah, everything now that will ever meet. He is all sufficient, all powerful. He is Yah.
Sovereign one, ancient of days. Set apart is your name. And humbly I seek your face.